Good morning, Malta and Gozo, and welcome to another episode of Lovin Daily. My name is John Sapari. Today I'm joined by Tim Diacono, and these are your 5 stories for today. Family doctors will soon be able to administer COVID-19 vaccine, Chris Fearn says. PN comes out in favour of considering further decriminalisation of cannabis. Government concludes studies for metro in Malta. Revolut Bank arrives in Malta, and first Maltese on an Ellen DeGeneres show flops in Audience Olympics. And make sure to stick by to the end of the episode where we have a special interview with Bjorn Vassallo, the president of the Malta Football Association. Tim?
So yes, Chris Fearn, the health minister, delivered some updates on Malta's COVID-19 vaccination strategy. He said a couple of things. So first of all, family doctors will soon enough be introduced into the national COVID-19 vaccine system, which means you'll be able to get vaccinated from your family doctor. Later on today, a new vaccination center will open at the University of Malta, and the first people who will be vaccinated there include social workers, counsellors and health students. Meanwhile, as of Monday, employees of ARMS, Malta and the Water Services Corporation will be vaccinated. Teachers will start being vaccinated on Wednesday, over a month ahead of the original target, which is very good news. And the general public, the plan remains in place for them to be vaccinated as of May. And ideally, herd immunity will be achieved in 3 months. He also delivered some very good news on the 2 cohorts which have been fully vaccinated so far, the over 85s and the medical staff. He said that while we're used to seeing tens of these people in hospital, that number has now plunged dramatically, and it's practically evaporated. So that's very good news, and it could be a strong indication that the vaccine is working.
Absolutely. Malta seems to be on track to achieving herd immunity by the summertime. Hopefully by then everything will have somewhat returned to normal. Businesses will be flourishing again, and our tourism industry will hopefully pick up. Moving on to the second story, the PN has come out in favour of considering further decriminalisation of cannabis. The Nationalist Party came out in favour of Robert Abela's plan to regulate the responsible personal use of cannabis after a white paper was shown yesterday. I quote, the PN said, "The PN is in favour of considering further decriminalising the possession of cannabis for responsible personal use," a PN spokesperson told Lovin Malta yesterday. This comes a few months after MEP Roberta Metsa called for the expungement of criminal records of non-violent drug offenders. Obviously, this is a good news in terms of, and it's not something you see often, both parties coming together and agreeing on a certain topic, but it seems like what's transpired over the past few weeks, especially over the past weekend where a couple in St. Julian's were arrested for smoking half a joint, has really galvanized the nation into kind of considering further reforms when it comes to the personal use of cannabis. Parliamentary Secretary Rosin Khattaria has been campaigning for this for quite some time, and it finally seems now that some real action is being taken to decriminalise cannabis for personal use.
Yeah, I mean, it seems that they finally realised that, or they're starting to realise at least, that the previous calls for a war on drugs are just complete rubbish, and that they're starting to move in a better direction. Obviously, they're still considering, but it is a step in the right direction, and now hopefully the country can move forward and get this plan on the way. Moving on, Ian Borge, Transport Minister, said yesterday that studies for an eventual metro in Malta have been concluded. He said that only he and a few other people in the country have access to these studies, but he said from now that the plans will be very controversial. So obviously there's a lot of projects going on at the moment, roadworks. Each and every single one seems to bring about some kind of controversy. If it's not a roundabout, it's a tree, or else a garden. And he said, as a warning, like, if people are already going to be criticizing me for these projects, might as well kill the metro in its cradle, because you ain't seen nothing yet.
Absolutely.
Which, I mean, it sounds cross, but I mean, when you think of it logistically, it probably makes sense, right? It's no joke to build a metro, and there will probably have to be some compromises.
Absolutely, it's a huge undertaking at the end of the day, but what's something I believe in the future will reap massive benefits for the island, for our country. Obviously, some sacrifices have to be made on the way, but if you look in the long term, this really is something that could be sustainable, could really help our economic our footprint, and really make create a sustainable future for us. So I'm totally for this idea.
Absolutely.
Moving on to our fourth story, Revolut Bank has arrived in Malta. Revolut, the popular fintech company, has now opened its banking services to its over 190,000 Maltese customers. A lot of good news for foreigners especially, who now can have access to additional services if they decide to upgrade to Revolut Bank, including a deposit guarantee scheme. So foreigners will be definitely welcoming that news. Revolut Bank also offers an array of financial services and products for its customers, and customers can now obviously opt into it by upgrading via the app, but there have been some glitches in the system. It appears that some people aren't able to upgrade it yet. That tends to be the case obviously when you roll out something new, but it's good news in all, seeing more banking options arrive in Malta, especially for foreigners who find it somewhat difficult to set up local bank accounts here in Malta.
Yeah, I mean, when you have the likes of Bank of Valletta pretty much telling people that we don't even want you to deposit your money in our accounts, want you to move it away, and all the new restrictions in place for opening bank accounts and conducting transactions, it is Revolut's decision is probably filling a hole in the market, and it's certainly welcome news. On to our final story of the day. 25-year-old Ryan Kalleya became the first ever Maltese person to appear on the famous Ellen DeGeneres show last night in America. And basically he was placed in a Zoom competition with someone from Malawi and someone from Belgium, right? From Belgium.
Yeah.
And the competition, drum roll, you have to flip a bottle and lands correctly.
And that's it. Yeah.
Ryan, he didn't do well, right?
No, it was kind of a very anticlimactic audience Olympics. Ryan unfortunately came in last place. I don't think he even managed to flip the bottle properly. But I guess the experience in itself was quite great to see a Maltese person on Ellen's show, although it was virtually. I'm sure he's glad that he was on there, and he looked like he had a lot of fun doing it. But next time, Ryan, maybe do a couple of practice shots before, practice flips. So he did apparently. Okay. Well, maybe this wasn't his time, but a lot of fun nonetheless, and cool to see Malta on Ellen's show. With that being said, that brings us to the end of our stories. Make sure to stay tuned for a special interview we have with Bjorn Vassallo, the president of the Malta Football Association, where he'll discuss the association's new strategy. But before that, here's a quick trailer of Lovin Malta's series Meet the Boss, Season 2, Episode 1.
Not focusing on yourself is not easy, but I think at the end of the day it will bring the best in you and other people. You can have a good idea from different perspectives and different contexts. So it can be you're doing something which is innovative. You can be doing something more effectively, more efficiently. No situation is the same. And if you're really not happy with what you're doing, either professionally or personally, then you need to do something, and something needs to give.
Welcome back to Lovin Daily. We're now joined by Bjorn Vassallo, the president of the Malta Football Association. Bjorn, thank you so much for accepting this interview. The MFA just released its 4-year strategy, a new 4-year strategy. But before I want to jump into that, I want to ask, Malta has always been a football crazy country. Everyone watches it, everyone follows it, the clubs domestically and internationally. But we've always performed poorly when it comes to competing internationally. Do you think this strategy has what it takes to take Malta to the next level, to become a competitive international footballing country, to the likes of countries like Iceland, for example?
For inviting me here. Of course, we are very confident that this will take us to the next step. And we are confident because obviously we know what football is about in this country. It's been 120 years of a lot of dedication by many people, but most of those people work in an amateurish world. So football hasn't got to the next level, which is the professionalization. And in our opinion, to do that, you need to focus on a clear strategy which will take you there. So results, as you have said, in the last 60 or more years when we have played international football, as in national teams, having been great, obviously with all the limitations and the situations which I was explaining about how football is played and how football is received and how football mechanisms work in this country, mainly most of in part-time basis. That is something which obviously has put us in a situation where we can reach a certain level and not go beyond. Right. So all of this in here, most of the content obviously looks into at putting Malta as in football as in a position that will take us further and evolve better in terms of result. But the result is at the end of the day, the final thing, the bottom line. To arrive there, you need a lot of work, you need a lot of planning, and you need a lot of expertise and resources and money and other. So we are planning all this within our strategy. We are started already to work in 2020 because this starts in 2020 due to COVID. Obviously, we could not release it before because there was a lot of work to be done, and we are tackling important situations in this strategy in relation to the clubs and the governance and the way they operate, together with the association, because it's very important, obviously, that the structures of the association are in line with whatever is nowadays administrative viability, but mostly in terms of technical development. I have always said that my mandate, the legacy of my mandate, I wanted to be performance and results. And to come there, you need obviously to have a plan, which is a long-term plan on the basis of youth development. So we are doing a lot of initiatives which are included in here, which will help us to produce better football players for the future. That's an example. Reforming the coach education, which will help us obviously to have better coaches that can teach the kids through a national curriculum to be better players going forward. A reform in the technical center, which has already happened by bringing in experts. We have brought Italian coaches, Italian experts that can obviously manage better a unified game philosophy for our national teams, which in my opinion we had not before. All this will help us to obviously go to another level, but at the end we need also professionalization. And professionalization is not about only the player being professional, but first he needs a setup, and the setup has to come from the club. At the moment, the MFA gives that setup for its national team selections, but the clubs, unfortunately, as yet, they don't, because of budget, because of capacity building, because of infrastructure, and this is obviously a main issue. So we have the technical center at Ta'ali, where we manage our boys and girls and all our national teams, which start at the age of 14, which is set up like a professional football club. And we have the clubs which run onto a semi-pro. And although the budgets and the expertise has grown in the last years, obviously it's not enough when you compare with countries like on the same size as us. You mentioned Iceland, you mentioned Cyprus. So we are trying to, based on best practices, which we have seen working in other countries, we are trying to get there. And we are trying to get there first and foremost by going through governance reforms. And these governance reforms will allow for our football clubs, firstly, on a sporting matter, to have our professional clubs and our community clubs, which will be the amateur clubs. So we separate both things. Because that sportingly is done. When we then start with the governance reform, which at the moment is at a stage of negotiation internally and externally with the stakeholders, and hopefully by July we have a revision of statute, that will be the first step. And secondly, then we have a total overhaul of the club licensing, because the clubs need a license to compete in the sporting classification where they play. At the end, then, the professional clubs by 2023 have to become a company, a limited company. So there needs to be ownership. So people owe a club, entities, private, owe a club, and then they can invest in that club. So whatever today is a sui generis, l-laqa tal-komitat, il-laqa ġenerali li tella l-membri tal-komitat, that will be different in the coming years. So the clubs need to be fully privatized, the professional clubs. And that will bring that people then will start, companies, whoever is investing in the football, will start to put forward ideas, more money, professionalization, and the clubs will obviously be, in our opinion, much more solid. And that will bring a situation where players then become professionals.
Right.
So this is one thing locally. Then obviously we need to try and export our best product to go and play abroad. And that will make obviously abroad as a full, you can find both the amateur clubs but also the professional clubs. So those players, and we have a lot of talent that can make it, like others have made in the past, we still have at present. So the idea is twofold. Work on the clubs, professionalize the clubs, which then will professionalize the players, work to export the players, and we have. So we are working also on whatever is a player welfare and child protection, whatever needs the Maltese player to leave the comfort zone of Malta and go and play abroad his fortunes. And also work on the long-term plan, which is the Malta Football Foundation, the formation of a foundation which will be a separate vehicle of the association, which will work on 3 levels mainly, which are accessibility and participation. So we want to increase the participation. We want to go to schools. We are discussing at the moment with Ministry of Education a big, vast program to reach out kids between 9 and 11 in all state and Catholic and independent schools in Malta. So that is a large program which we want to do, assisted by UEFA, and it should start in September this year. Second is the pathway, grassroots youth development to the elite through regional hubs. So kids 11 and 14, we will, the most talented through talent identification, we will give them hours of training within our regional hubs with our coaches through a national curriculum of football and prepare them for the national teams at the age of 14, which then will be the Academy in Ta'ali. And finally, the last level in the Malta Football Foundation is, as I mentioned before, to prepare the players in the best way possible, in the player welfare, and take care of them in the child protection, the social responsibility, which we do a lot as an association. So holistically, this is all what we are doing fil-pilastri l-aktar importanti li għaw f'din l-istrateġija. And apart from this, then there is the infrastructure, which is totally needed. And we have invested 30 million in the last 10 years as an association, my predecessor, Norman Damin in the Mayo, and we need to sustain that infrastructure. And the government is assisting a lot in the sustaining of that, so we could invest then in the development and totally in the core business, which is football, the game.
Yeah, absolutely. So a key component of this strategy appears to be youth development, developing a strong foundation for youth players to be able to take their skills and export it abroad and become elite players. One of the questions clubs might have is what incentive do they have as a club to develop these youth players, to invest in youth programs when eventually their players are going to, might be poached from a foreign club abroad? Do they get compensated financially for this? What's the incentive there really for them to invest heavily in youth development programs when at the end of the day they might, lose these players for foreign clubs?
First and foremost, we don't live in isolation. So what happens in Malta happens everywhere else in every country in terms of football. There is a regulation, which is the local regulation for each member association in football, but there is also the UEFA and FIFA regime. So everyone follows the same rules. I mean, if you are an amateur and you don't give a contract to a player, that means that the player can go anywhere in the world without the club asking for money. When he signs the first contract anywhere in the world, then the club gets a training compensation. So this is a mechanism that works. Obviously, it works for every club in every country, same in Malta. So one of the most nicest things, I mean, for a club, if if you are having a youth nursery which is engaging with important football players that make the level to go abroad, in my opinion, is to have one of your players represent you in one of the bigger clubs. It's, at the end, it's a pathway. You start from somewhere, and then it's like going to university. Before you go to university, you go to work somewhere on part-time, but then you are you have your diploma, and you can earn as much money as you want, and you make a career. The football is the same. So when you are in a youth nursery, you are the amateur, and then you go to the university. When you go into the youth team or the first team, and you get your best, and then you are ready to go abroad and play. Obviously, if you have talent, if you have the level. It doesn't mean that all the players will make it there, but some of the players have the talent and have the level. Unfortunately, some of the players choose to stay here. We live in a nice country, and they like the comfort zone. So we need to work harder with them on the player welfare. We need to prepare them better, that if there is an opportunity at the age of 16, because European Union to European Union, club in European Union, you can go at the age of 16. Outside of European Union is above, or coming in is above 18. But that's not our market. So already at the age of 16, you can move. We have seen this with the women's, for example.
I was going to bring this up because there seems to be more Maltese women players playing abroad. And the men, not as many men playing abroad. You see it with Hayley Bajea, Kaylee Willis in the Serie A. It's full of Maltese women playing abroad. But the men don't seem to be going abroad as much. Why is this the case? Are they just more comfortable here in Malta?
Yes.
Do the women want it more than the men?
Oh, absolutely. They are very much more comfortable here, obviously. They are given a lot of perks, and this is the situation. If you take Iceland, you mentioned Iceland before. Iceland have 120 professional male players from where the national team coach can choose. We have 3 or 4, unfortunately, at the moment. So there is this level. And the situation is, obviously, not only with Malta, but I have heard also presence from other countries speaking about this real problem, that boys at the age of 16, 17, 18, they don't want to do the sacrifice and go to, obviously, you have to fight. We are coming from Malta. It's not a big football nation in terms of level. So you need to fight with the Portuguese, you need to fight with the Italian, with the Romanian, and obviously they are not, most of them, not ready to do that. So we will work hard in the player welfare to try and establish channels where we can, obviously, through our contacts, have clubs, feeder clubs, which work for us, and position these players at the age of 16, 17, 18, the talented ones, and we have already started communicating and doing this sort of work to try and find the right clubs, because it's not Inter Milan or Juventus or Chelsea or Spurs. Those not not the clubs we want to send our players, but second leagues, big youth setups, which are mainly not the big clubs, which our players can fit rightly there and start a career. I'm pretty sure and confident we can do this, like all the rest have done. But it takes time. We need to produce the players. We need to have better coach education. We need to have everyone. You need to have unity, because this involves a lot of time. As I said, we need to leave the experts to work. But there's a plan. And when there is a plan, at least, and this is why we can perform better, because we have performed some good things in the past, but we can surely do much better.
Right.
And if there's a plan, as I said, I'm pretty confident that if we try and manage most of the objectives which are here in the next years, then hopefully Malta, with the boys, with the girls, in whatever we do in football, because this is not only about the pitch and the 90 minutes, the Malta FA works holistically on a lot of projects which obviously impact and include football, but it's very variable what we do. And
so you say the MFA can help, and I feel in this case the plan is needed more now than ever, especially over the past few weeks when we've seen several football stories come up, especially one regarding Kurt Shaw. We say that was a wasted opportunity where a talented young Maltese player had the opportunity to play abroad for a bigger side, and unfortunately, in one way or another, he that never came to fruition.
That was a contact made by the Malta FA for the player. We invited them, they saw him at national team level, they contacted us back that they wanted to put an offer to the club. Obviously, today it looks like it was wasted. I mean, it's not. He's still young. At the end of the season, probably, with the level he's showing, he can have other offers. So we will be pushing that not only Kurt, but other players that obviously have his level at a certain age, that they should pursue a career abroad.
But does this fall under the good governance strategy of the MFA in the sense that clubs like Sliema, who are in financial disarray, struggle in this sense to create this deal to send him abroad? I mean, how can the MFA step in to ensure that these deals, don't fall through in the future, and that clubs like Sliema are, have good governance, a good structure within them, so that they can support their players? And the case also is the fact that in Sliema Wanderers, players haven't been paid for up to 10 months. Is it a matter of mismanagement, or how can the MFA step in to ensure that these clubs have a solid foundation, so that players like Kurt and players who are playing for Sliema Wanderers are being compensated properly for them? Is it a matter of maybe clubs need to be financed more, need more support? Are they struggling as clubs in general, or is it just a matter of mismanagement within the specific?
Okay, so let's make it clear on one thing. There are a lot of clubs which are very solid, and there are a lot of clubs which have business plans and plan their income and also their expenditure, and never came into situations like this. But it can happen, like anything other in the world, in any business you do. And in the past, MFA has worked a lot on reforming a lot of regulatory, especially in relation to the players, especially in the regulations which are domestic regulations in terms of compensation between the amateur and going into the professional. Obviously, the players are registered with the clubs. So at the end of the day, the association, what can the association do is that to ensure that the governance is solid, that everyone follows whatever nowadays is required in terms of compliance. And this is what we are doing, and it's part also of this strategy. We have started the discussions, I mentioned it before, for a revision of statute to bring, to streamline and bring better governance, first and foremost, to the association structures. So we are changing those structures, we are changing the representation, we are changing the voting powers, we are bringing more women, so equality in gender equality, and there's a whole revamped situation which will be brought before the annual general meeting in July. So by the coming season we'll have a totally new statute, and the association will be in a good solid position, better than it was before in terms of governance. That will go on the licensing of the clubs. The domestic licensing will totally change. As I said, the professional, the amateurs, the requisites will be totally different. Obviously, there will be more need for oversight on this side, where obviously there are bigger budgets, and which will also bring, at the end of the day, to the club cooperative structuring, whereby I said before that the clubs need to become at the top league, Premier League, by 2023, end of 2023, fully owned, privately owned, like a company in other business. And they need to have their business plan, there need to be due diligence, there need to be a situation where we need to understand where the money is coming from. So everything else, it's like Malta at the moment going through this Manival situation. We're doing the same in football. So discussions have started with MFSA, MBR, the ministry involved. Will have the same situations, the same oversight, the same compliance, also for the football clubs, because football is an economy. Football in Malta at the moment has a turnover between all the clubs, 53 in Malta and 14 in Gozo, of 25 million euros per year, which is a lot of money. Okay, in football, 25 million euros per year could be a budget of one club in Cyprus, which is the case with Apoel, for example. But for Malta, it's still a lot of money. And when you include also the capital investment, that's another 3 or 5 million every year. So we are an economy of 30 million euros per year with 15,000 affiliates. So yes, we contribute a lot. It makes it a big industry, and we need to be compliant. We need to address whatever are the situations, the neglects, the deficiencies which football has. So we bring football in a solid situation, and this is why we have come with a strategy which looks into, as you said before, the youth development, looks into the professionalization, looks into engaging the supporters through better competitions, looks into the performance, the results of the national teams, because at the end of the day, everything goes into the national teams, looks into sustainability of infrastructure, looks into assisting the clubs, because the MFA was a catalyst in 2012. There was another government administration at the time, and myself and the previous president, we had went to the government and said, we need to commercialize the facilities of the clubs.
Right.
It's only that will bring us fresh money that they can become sustainable. We cannot live on sugar daddies forever. And that has started after the Labour government came in place. There is a law today, there are guidelines. The clubs now are ready with a business plan, with a proper project to commercialize their facilities so they can make revenue and they can sustain their clubs. So everything is changing in the world of football. The MFA has always been a catalyst in this. There is a young administration in our association, and we have both the courage, because you need the courage and the guts, obviously. At the end of the day, we are all elected, and we live in a world of democracy, so it's not something which I wake up in the morning and decide to do. I had the manifest, I was elected president, now it's adopted as a strategy by the executive committee. It works like that. So it's not something which you do from today to tomorrow. But we have gone through already a year and a half, 2 years of this. Now we are in the process of putting together whatever is in this strategy. So we are trying to bring as the tagline says, we are trying to perform better and try and have football more engaging for people, to give joy and pride to this country. Because what we did in the Nations League with our national team, with better performances and good results, the people, even in COVID times, the reaction was great.
Yeah.
Everyone is supporting the national team because it's our colors, it's our pride, and we want the national team to win. But obviously, there's a lot of work, and we're still at the initial stages, and obviously we need to be very patient and leave the experts do their work, leave the association go through its strategy, and have the people support us, because I'm confident that we can do very much better.
Absolutely. I think one area that requires particular attention is a matter of social responsibility that the MFA takes very seriously in its strategy and has taken seriously for a while. But unfortunately, over the past few months, there have been several incidences, especially racist incidences, where players have been there have been allegations of racial abuse on the pitch, specifically Paul Mbong, and most this year with Maya Lucia, and it doesn't reflect what the MFA is about in terms of its social responsibility strategy. But what is being done to address it? Because it seems to be cropping up every now and then. Is the MFA taking an active role in preventing this? And how can we get to a stage where we can get rid of this behavior and promote inclusion in the future amongst all the clubs?
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. We have been very proactive about this. Even this year, a few months ago, we have put together an ethics and compliance committee. So all these cases go in front of the ethics committee. In the council on Tuesday coming, we will also introduce an ethics code, a conflict of interest directive, which obviously will help in all these situations. Unfortunately, football is made like anything else with people from the society. The situation is not only a football matter, it's a society matter, not only in Malta, also in other countries. However, football is very powerful, so it could be a very strong medium, and this is why whatever happens in football gets a big ħafna kif jgħidu bil-Malti, ħafna storbju. But I totally am in favor, and it's also included in our strategy, that we continue working. I mean, we have a budget of around 150,000, which every year goes into social responsibility. There's a fund, there's a committee that manages it. Dr. George Abela is the chairman, Father Hillary, Norman Daman and Demayo, they are all on this committee. We work a lot on inclusivity programs, on the situation about discrimination. We also, in the last years, engaged in a lot of applications with European Union and brought a lot of funds in terms of programs which are intended for the benefit of our nurseries and other groups and NGOs which work in this social responsibility. So we are doing a lot in this, and working also with ministries, the Disability Ministry and others. Also today, meeting the Ministry of Education, we are working on an MOU which also includes the association through its ambassadors going to the schools and making sessions, not only sporting sessions, but obviously sessions which relate to children with difficulties and problems, and speaking about life skills. So there is a lot which the association is doing, and we have a whole department run by Peter Busuttil and his team, which now will fall under the Fondazione Hoppel Football. So we are very engaged in this, and it has to be. It's an obligation from the association.
Finally, over the past few weeks, there's been an incident where Sijiwi FC players had broadcasted a video of a young Maltese girl, an X-rated video of a young Maltese girl in a restaurant. Obviously, this is damning for the whole football community, that players engage in this type of behavior. But really, what does this say about Maltese players' attitude towards women in society, that this incident happened, this video was leaked, and it was all online? I mean, so Sijiwi FC have since, the head coach has since resigned and whatnot, so there have been good steps, and I believe there is an internal investigation. But really, what does this say about the state of football players in Malta and their attitude towards women in society?
All of this usually goes in front of our ethics, as I said, ethics committee. And the situation is that, obviously, as I said, we have 15,000 affiliates, and I mean, me personally and the association cannot control every act of every person which is within our. However, if anything happens, then there is the mechanism that works. Then there is the committee, the ethics committee, then there is the reporting, then there is the final decision. It's already very, very, very positive that the club, Sijiwi in this case, took action. The people involved resigned. It was a social gathering. Unfortunately, we disassociate totally with this kind of situations. However, as I said, if we have what it takes in the structure that you could confront whatever negativity is coming, then that's in our control, because at the end of the day, this is the least we could do. And after that, if they are found guilty, if they are found in breach, then obviously the regulations will obviously take care of whatever the situation is. So on that, this is what I can control, that we have the total regulation, that we have the bodies in place, and that they confront whatever negativity is coming.
Bjorn, thank you. The strategy sounds very promising and very fulfilling and comprehensive. Thank you once again for accepting this interview with Lovin Malta. And for everyone watching, thank you for joining today, and have a day full of lovin'.